My Govanen. Welcome to the Tolkien Lore Channel. I'm the Tolkien Geek, and I did a previous video where I talked about the story arcs of the four hobbits, and I'll link to that in the description below. And in that video, I mentioned that Merry and Pippin's parallel storylines in Gondor and Rohan is kind of worth a video in itself, and so that's what I'm going to do in this video, is kind of compare and contrast their experiences as basically sworn swords to different lords and see how those comparisons maybe play into their story arcs a little bit. And also just because I find both of these really fascinating. And there's other aspects of these same chapters that you could use for other ideas, which I have in the future as well. So I'll have other videos touching on different aspects of this part of the storyline. But for now, let's look at Merry and Pippin. So of course the jumping off point for this is when Gandalf takes Pippin after he looks at the Palantir, rides off to Gondor, and leaves Merry with Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and the Riders of Rohan. So because of this, they end up in the two different places, and kind of they both kick off their parallel paths in the same manner by basically swearing fealty to the respective lords of where they are. Pippin to Denethor, Merry to Theoden. And they do this for fundamentally different reasons. When Pippin swears fealty to Denethor, he basically does it as a way of saying thank you on behalf of, to Denethor in place of Boromir, because Boromir, of course, saved Merry and Pippin, or tried to. And because of that, that he feels like he owes some debt of gratitude to Denethor. And Merry, on the other hand, when he swears fealty to Theoden, he does it more out of just a sense of, I really like this guy. And you end up seeing that kind of later in their conversation when this happens. Merry basically says, "A father you shall be to me." And Theoden says, "For a little while," which has ominous implications that maybe he didn't foresee. But at any rate, he's doing it more out of just a sense of true love and fealty rather than obligation, sort of. And the way that Denethor and Theoden return, feelings in any sense to Merry and Pippin is kind of mirrored in that, because Denethor basically sees Pippin as a tool. He immediately starts using Pippin as a means of finding out as much as he can about Boromir and the rest of the Fellowship, and Gandalf even tells him later, well, I think Denethor even says this at the time. He's like, "I gathered more from your words than what you intended to say." Gandalf kind of blows it off and says, "You handled yourself about as well as you could have." But at any rate, that's kind of how Denethor sees Pippin. And it's interesting that, Pippin is doing his thing kind of out of obligation, and Denethor is basically taking advantage of that in a very utilitarian type of way. Whereas Theoden, on the other hand, he accepts Merry's, oath of fealty for what it is and returns the same kind of feelings for Merry. Like Merry loves Theoden, Theoden also loves Merry. He thinks of him as somebody to be, he's an actual person to care for and also to protect. And he basically tells Merry this at some point. He says, "You were left here for my protection." When they're having the argument about Merry wants to go with the riders, and Theoden's like, "You can't. You can't ride there on a pony, and none of my riders can take you as an extra burden on their horses, and you can't ride a horse by yourself." And basically Merry complains or whatever that, what was I left here for? And he says, "You were left here for me to protect you. That's to make sure you're okay." When Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli went off their way, that's why they left you here, so that you don't end up in a bad way. So it's really interesting how the way in which they pledge their fealty is kind of returned in kind, and that's just the beginning of this. Another aspect of kind of their service to their respective lords in general is that Pippin and Merry both have this sense of uselessness. Pippin has a sense of uselessness like, what real point is there in me trying to serve Denethor, who has all these, much greater men at his beck and call? Merry keeps thinking of himself basically as baggage. He's like, "I don't want to just be baggage left behind." which is ironic because, of course, when he finally does go off with Éowyn, who in the book he doesn't realize is Éowyn, she's going under the pseudonym Dernhelm. So if you've never read the book and you only know the movies, he doesn't recognize her. He doesn't know who she is. He rides off with her, though, and when they arrive at the scene of battle at the Palantir Fields, he realizes, I'm probably actually pretty useless here. And he actually feels like he's just baggage and like maybe I should have just been left behind, because which of course is ironic because of what happens later, but I'll touch on that in a different part of this video. Now literally almost everything about this storyline for both of them is about their service to their respective lords, and it's really interesting how that plays out, and you'll see that as we get further. But here's another aspect in which that's true. Both of them are released from service by their respective lords. Theoden releases Merry before he leaves with the Riders of Rohan, for the obvious reason that I don't expect to come back, and you're not coming along with the battle, so it's like, you don't owe me anything anyway. So he's releasing him out of a sense of, to the extent that you could have given me any service, you've done it, and now I'm giving you, your freedom back. You don't owe me anything. No big deal. Denethor, on the other hand, releases Pippin after he's already made it clear, I'm going to kill myself in Faramir, and you might as well, I don't really care what you do with your life. And Denethor kind of has that attitude toward everybody in Gondor. I mean, he actually makes the point, why do you want to run from death? We're all about to die. You might as well die sooner rather than later. And he basically gives Pippin his freedom to go, die in whatever way seems best to him, or to go find Gandalf, which basically is a response to Pippin saying, well, I'm not going to despair of life until Gandalf does. And he says, well, go find the Grey Fool then. But Denethor releases Pippin out of a sense of despair and pointlessness, whereas Theoden releases Merry out of a very different kind of emotional background of, I have accepted your service and you have fulfilled it to the extent that I think you can, and therefore there's no point in me holding you to it anymore. Why would I? So again, there's that really interesting dichotomy of how, these two are playing out. And then, of course, both of these end with their respective lords dying, which both of them pretty much anticipated. Theoden, of course, dies in battle. Denethor rather ignominiously kills himself. Those two things are very different. And, of course, the actions of both the hobbits play into not directly their lord's death, but in the events surrounding them, because Merry, of course, helps Éowyn kill the Witch King. I'll get to that a little more. And Pippin saves Faramir before Denethor can kill him along with himself. And so Denethor is finally like, well, whatever, you can do that, but you can't keep me from killing myself. Ha! So they both are very integral to the events around their lord's death, and they see the death. And in fact, Theoden speaks to Merry second to last next to Éomer. Again, difference between book and movie. He doesn't talk to Éowyn because Éowyn is fainted after her encounter with the Witch King because Black Breath and stuff. But he does talk to Merry, and he actually tells him, I wish I could have seen Éowyn again. Merry almost gets to tell him she's like right there, and then Éomer comes up and he's like hands off the kingship. But in their final conversation, Theoden and Merry basically apologizes for disobeying him, and Theoden says, it's forgiven, great heart will not be denied. Whereas Denethor and Pippin, of course, in their relationship, to the extent that they had one, on a very bad note, in that Pippin is basically held as a traitor by Denethor, and which is ironic because he just released him from his service, and then Pippin says, it's like, I don't want to be released from your service. But Denethor theoretically didn't care, but then now he's thinking of Pippin as basically a traitor, along with Baragond, of course. So there's just a lot of differences there as well. Now let's kind of talk about all that Witch King stuff, because that's where it gets a little more interesting. So with the Witch King thing, this is kind of parallel to what Pippin does in saving Faramir, and I've actually done a video on that just recently. So if you want to check that video, I will link to that as well. It's basically a video covering the different aspects of laws being broken in Middle-earth and in the Lord of the Rings, and the last one I covered is Pippin and Baragon breaking laws trying to save Faramir. But let's start with Merry, because with Merry, of course, he ends up going along with the Riders of Rohan against Theoden's will. He does it with the help of Dernhelm, who doesn't know who she is. It's Eowyn, of course. Eowyn is herself duty-bound not to go with the Riders of Rohan. Theoden has basically said, look, I'm leaving you in charge while I'm gone. So she is basically duty-bound to stay and lead the people of Rohan who aren't going to war. She breaks, her duty and helps Merry to break his, and goes off and follows Theoden to war. Similarly, Pippin, who is duty-bound to obey Denethor because he refuses to be released from his service, enlists the help of Baragon, who is a soldier of Minas Tirith and therefore also duty-bound to obey certain rules, to help him save Faramir or keep him from getting killed. Now, in this case, it's like Pippin actively recruits Baragon almost against Baragon's will, whereas with Merry, Eowyn comes up and is like, you want to go with him, right? You can come with me. So it's a little bit different how all that plays out, but the interesting thing about it is both of their actions in breaking their the command of their respective lords ends up resulting in some major events happening. So when Merry and Pippin do their things, Merry ends up helping Eowyn kill the Witch King, which is a huge deal because Merry ends up stabbing him in the back of the knee when he's about to kill Eowyn, and then Eowyn picks up her sword and stabs him in the face. Whereas Pippin, of course, manages to save Faramir, who is, short of Aragorn, I would say Faramir, well, short of Aragorn and Gandalf, I would say Faramir is the best character in the story in the sense of being wise, good, all the things that you would want in a person. Frodo is too, but I think Frodo is kind of like a small-scale version, almost, because he's a hobbit. He's literally a small scale. That there's some symbology in that, hobbits are just that way. But saving Faramir is a huge deal because Faramir is a hugely important character. And of course, killing the Witch King is actually way more important. In fact, Pippin actually tells Merry later on, like, I have a lot to do to catch up to you at this point. But they both accomplish some really significant things because they end up breaking the rules. And that's another aspect in which you could say that this video is kind of parallel to that other one that I mentioned earlier that I'm linking to. Now, the really interesting part about this is the way that their storylines now intertwine back into each other. Merry and Pippin, of course, meet up after the Witch King has been killed and Faramir has been saved, and Merry is taken to the Houses of Healing and Pippin is trying to take care of him, but that's really not the significant aspect here. What's really interesting, the Witch King, if you remember, was facing off with Gandalf at the gates of Minas Tirith, not like in the movie. Gandalf was not cowering in fear. None of that happened. They were about to potentially have the biggest fight in the history of Middle-earth, ever since Fingolfin faced off with Morgoth. But when the horns of Rohan sounded, the Witch King flies off. Pippin comes up right as Gandalf is about to give chase and says, you gotta come save Faramir. And Gandalf's like, but a whole bunch of people are gonna die if I don't go off again, and find the Witch King. And he's like, but Denethor's gonna burn Faramir alive. And Gandalf's like, what? Tell me quickly so I can figure out what I need to do. So he basically tells him, and he says, fine, I'll go save Faramir, knowing that something really bad is going to happen. And he even basically says, the hand of Mordor is in this. This is not just random. There's something bad going on here. So Pippin, in his actions, draws Gandalf away, which arguably is the reason that Theoden ends up dying and that Eowyn ends up in really bad shape from fighting the Witch King. and therefore it's Merry's actions that allow Éowyn to kill the Witch King. His makes up for what Pippin is forced to do. I'm not saying like Pippin's fault or anything, but like Pippin brings something to Gandalf's attention that has to be attended to, but Merry kind of makes up for that by doing the thing, or helping to do the thing, that Gandalf was going to try to do had Pippin not intervened when he did. Interestingly enough, in the same way that Merry kind of makes up for what Pippin did, Pippin's saving of Faramir is arguably the only reason Éowyn ends up surviving. If you read the book carefully, you will notice a couple things. One of those is that when Aragorn brings her back, he kind of makes a comment like, her arm is healed. It was broken, but it's been tended. It's not healed at that point, but I mean, it's been tended and it will heal. But the Black Breath issue with the Witch King and other aspects of things that are going on with her, that'll be a little bit trickier. And he basically tells Éomer, you'll need to keep a watch over her. And when she finally wakes up, Éomer, no, I think it's Gandalf that says, it's good to see you, awake to hope or something like that. And she says, to life and hope, health and hope. I forget exactly how he words it. And she basically says, hope. I'm not so sure about that. And if you pay attention, some of the aspects of the things that are doubtful about her make it unclear whether she will survive if she does not, have something to really live for, basically. Even if only in the sense that for a good chunk of the story now, Éowyn has been looking for death in battle because that's what she thinks is going to be the most glorious. Even if she manages to survive to the point of being physically healed, her next thing is going to be to run off and literally get herself killed in battle because that's what she's aiming to do. But Faramir, in his conversations with Éowyn, ends up kind of turning her around, and she finally kind of comes to the realization that dying in battle for glory's sake is maybe not the best idea, and she decides to focus on better things and falls in love with Faramir. And Faramir had already been in love with her, and she either wasn't in love with him at that point or just wasn't willing to admit it, but eventually it all works out. So interestingly enough, Merry makes up for Pippin intervening in Gandalf's trying to find the Witch King, but it's Pippin's actions in saving Faramir that allow Éowyn, who fought the Witch King, to end up being a happy, healthy human being who didn't just want to go, fight in battle so that she could die gloriously, which would have been a huge loss because Éowyn is also an awesome character. So it's really interesting how, like, you can't have Pippin's work out without Merry's, and you can't have Merry's work out without Pippin's. The two stories, like two branches of, something that split, now come back together and end up being one so perfectly, and I only noticed this in like the most recent time that I read it, and it was just mind-blowing to me that Tolkien could have put all that together. So it's just a really fascinating end to their story and how all that works out. And so, you can kind of look at that and see for their histories, not only how they kind of grow through this process in their main story arcs, but just looking at the story itself and how it intertwines with each other back again after, because Merry and Pippin were basically inseparable. So the fact that they were separated meant there had to be something to bring them back together like that. And it's just so cool the way that Tolkien does it. I think it's awesome. So, hope you enjoyed that video. Hope you found the way that their stories worked out as interesting as I did. If you did like it, please do give it a thumbs up and share it around. You can follow me on Twitter at JRRTLore for occasional Tolkien trivia questions. You can subscribe to the channel here. Don't forget to click that bell icon. You can support the channel here, and you can find 2 of my previous videos here. Until the next time, I'm the Tolkien Geek, signing out for the Tolkien Lore channel. Namaste.